says we're live, so let me see if I can. Pull it up and see if I can see. If there's anything I can see. Still got a minute or so. Just looking to try and open up the chat window on YouTube here so that I can actually talk to you. Well, I'm going to talk to you regardless. I would kind of like to know what you think. Number one, I'd like to know if you can hear me and if you can see me, all of that kind of stuff. Make sure that all the tech is functioning properly, so you can actually make this thing kind of halfway enjoyable. I know there's a few of you on watching at this point. Come on, open up that chat window. It'll be hard for me to interact with you guys if YouTube doesn't let me open up a chat window. Alright, I'm going to assume that it's going to do kind of like it did last week, which was took a while for YouTube to catch up here and open up the chat window for me. Wait, we may have a chat window opening. Let's not get crazy. So the first thing I'm going to do is welcome you to No BS Woodworking, and this is Tuesday Tips. We're live, and hopefully at some point here I will be able to chat with you all. Ah, there we go. Look at that. I've got chat window open. Volume is very low. That's unfortunate. Let me see if I can figure out real quick how to adjust it. I'm trying a different mic system this week to see if by some chance I can get this without having to go through all the trouble of I'm at max volume there. Let's see if there's somewhere else I can modify my mic volume. Let's go, people. And my settings start coming up here. System settings. Let's see if we can't boost that microphone. thing, isn't it? Chat window just crashed. There we go. Hopefully it's coming back now. Volume needs a boost. I'm trying, folks. This is all until we get all the bugs worked out. We're just trying to, find the best system for doing these things. I figure another week or two, and we should have this all hopefully somewhere ironed out for all the technical problems. So, like I said, I let's try this. I'm gonna. That actually makes a big difference in the sound. Is that a little better? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller? All right. I'm just going to get started. So, once again, welcome to No BS Woodworking and Tuesday Tips. I have sort of limited this to my email list. You should have gotten an email reminding you that tonight was happening. Tonight I'm going to show you a little jig that I made for the bandsaw for making some curved drawer fronts. So a couple of months ago in the shop here, I ran a class on the Wood Whisperer jewelry box. I had talked to Mark and Nicole Spagnolo and asked if it was okay to run a class to build this. Well, my little version of this. Wait, is it coming up? Where is it? Yeah, there it is. Jewelry box that Mark did as a project for the Wood Whisperer Guild. And as you can see, the drawer fronts, basically the entire front of this jewelry box, has a curve to it. And what I made, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so video is choppy. I'm not sure what that is. We have massive amounts of, we're over 1 gig of internet speed here, so I'm not sure why things are bogging down, but hopefully it's just overall internet traffic. We're breaking YouTube with all the viewers here. I think we're up to, I don't know. Looks like we're all the way up to about 30, 35 people. So I'm pretty sure that's not breaking YouTube. So I don't know what the technical issue is there. I want to try one more thing next week. We're going to go through a streaming service and see if that improves the quality of the video a good bit and gets me out on a couple of different venues instead of just YouTube. Last week we tried YouTube and Instagram, and I talked to two of my friends that do a fair amount of this live streaming stuff and found out that basically Instagram is not made for this kind of stuff. It really just bogs everything down. So I'm going to, hopefully I've got the audio somewhat fixed at the moment. Next week I'm not only going to try a streaming service to improve the quality of the video, but I'm also going to try the wireless mic and see if that does it. I'm trying to set this up because I do teach classes out of the shop, and we usually run till sometime 5, 6-ish in the evening. I want to be able to set this up pretty quickly, do the live feed, and not spend the entire 2 hours from the time I kick people out of the shop until I start here setting up, and then another couple of hours tearing down afterwards. So I'm trying to do it as simply as possible and still give you good quality. So that's why until I get all the technical bugs down to the point where I can just do this repeatedly, pardon me, and give you a good quality product, I'm still limiting this simply to my email list, sending it out. You get a notification, you'll show up. Hopefully I can work out some of the bugs. Last week, like I said, we had some real serious issues caused by Instagram, and the video is available on YouTube. Hopefully, literally the next day, I left for Connecticut to teach a class at the Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking, and I've only just gotten back into the shop this morning, so I didn't have time to edit that last week's video to cut out the first half hour, which was us struggling with the internet problems. So hopefully tomorrow I can break away for an hour or so, get the extraneous stuff whittled off of that video on YouTube, and you'll be able to, and I'll do this video as well. So if you are tuning in after the fact, not live, and you're streaming this, it'll be a little bit more pleasant experience than watching me talk for 10 minutes about how the technical things are bothering me. So, okay. So, again, I showed you the little jewelry box that Mark Spagnolo made, and they gave me the permission to run that as a class, and we did. And when I looked at that curve, my first thought was to come up with some kind of a jig for my bandsaw that worked off of a pivot point and allowed me to strike that arc. Cut that arc for the drawer fronts, because there's 6 pieces that have to be all the exact same arc. And again, my initial thought was to have some kind of an outrigger hanging off the side of my bandsaw, and then something with a pivot point that I could adjust and give me the proper radius. Well, once we drew it out in class, and we realized that, I realized that that radius is about 34 inches that gives me the curve on the front of that thing. I looked at where the bandsaw is in the shop currently, and I didn't have 3 feet hanging off the side of it without running into my table saw that I could put some kind of a rig. So what I did was I came up with, and I'm going to switch cameras here real quick if I can. Oh, come on. Oh, that's not the camera I wanted. That's the camera I wanted. So now you can see the jig that I kind of came up with. That piece of plywood that the shuttle runs on is about 8-9 inches wide, and it's got a curved track that is set into it, and then the shuttle itself has a groove that allows it to follow that curve. And I'm going to show you pretty quickly just the basics of how I created that. And mine was done with the Shaper Origin, and this made it really quick and easy. You don't have to have an Origin to do this. Maybe next week I'll show you how I would do it without that. I've got the microfence, plunge router, and edge guide, but it also I've also got the circle guide that goes with it, and you could strike this whole thing using that. So that'd be something for another day. So I do need to switch out one more time for my camera because I've got a camera here behind me. So as I said, let me see, make sure that's the, yep, that's working just fine. I'm going to bring my camera over. So if you guys haven't used the Shaper Origin, I'm finding it to be more and more valuable in the shop the longer I have access to one. And I'm trying to do this and get rid of the really obnoxious glare on the stream. So for this jig, I did all the layout right on the machine. I didn't draw this up in SketchUp or anything like that. And that's really what I wanted to go through real quick. So I'm going to switch over to this camera and show you what I see on the screen here. So the first thing I did was lay out a tape board. I get asked this a lot. What is with the domino tape? And what the deal with the domino tape is, you put this stuff down, it's a random tape. The patterns are not repeating. And you have to space them, they're spaced randomly on the board. The folks at Shaper told me you don't want to space them more than about 2 to 3 inches apart. But I tend to put them a lot closer together because I tend not to use massive boards in order to lay out my tape. Again, you don't need to have any kind of very specific way you lay this out. It's random. And what you do is the Shaper has a scan mode that allows you to take a picture of that. And what it does by doing that is it creates a map of the whole surface that we're working on. And it tells it where it is at any given moment. And that's how this thing corrects for your handheld inaccuracies. Okay? So we got the Shaper back in there. And now I've got it right in there so the glare is on the screen again. There we go. I'll move over this way just a tiny bit. There we go. And so if I shrink it up a little more, the way I did the design on the machine was, I told you the drawer fronts were a 34-inch radius to give us that curve. And what I wanted to do, when I created that shuttle, is I wanted that track that it was going to run on to be about 2 inches from the edge of my jig. And the edge of the jig was going to go right up against the bandsaw. So 34-inch radius to the edge of the plywood. If I step back 2 inches, that gives me a 32-inch radius, which is, if I move this thing, well, if I go down to cut, this line right here, that just highlighted in green, up top there, is that 32-inch radius. I wanted my track to be about 3/4 of an inch wide, so 32 minus 3/4 of an inch comes down to 31 1/4. So I drew circles. Again, if I back up far enough, you can start to see that I just drew circles in the design program here, and it is, if I go into create here, I can create a circle and then just tell it what diameter. And how I placed it onto my board was I created a center line, which you should be able to see on the screen right now. It's running right down the middle. And I drew that, if I can get the camera to it, on the piece of plywood that I'm going to cut the jig from, and I have a center mark on my domino board, my tape board, and I just lined those up, and at that point it was pretty easy. I placed that 2-inch circle, 2 inches off that edge, place the next one 3/4 of an inch down. And because I had students here that actually made the jigs with the shaper origin, let's move that away. There we go. Keep the lights out of the screen. What I did was, instead of just creating an outside and an inside line for that track, I added a third circle to the thing. The shaper uses 1/4 inch shank bits, and this one is a 1/4 inch spiral down cut bit because we're cutting into plywood. So what I've got is 32 inches, 31 1/4, and then 31 3/4. And what that allowed the students to do was cut, to create the groove in the plywood. We could cut inside the lines and do 3 cuts to create a 3/4 inch wide groove, rather than just an inside and an outside line, and then they have to pocket in between. And what pocket means on the shaper origin is it doesn't tell you which way to run the router. You just scrub it back and forth to get rid of the stuff. And to me, I don't like that function as much for a lot of things, because the reason this machine only has 1/4 inch shank bits in it is they don't want you turning really big bits, and they don't want you climb cutting with anything. And when you go to the pocket cut, there's no direction on what way you're supposed to run the machine in order to not climb cut. And again, because I was having students do this, that bothers me more than if I'm doing it myself. Simply because a lot of people just aren't really that proficient at running the router in the wrong direction, as it were. Okay. Here, if you look at it, and hopefully it's available on screen there, I've zoomed in a bit on my cut, and you can see that it's got those marching ants moving from right to left on the screen, and that's telling you that's the direction it wants you to cut. If I move up to the outermost line, you can now see that those dashed lines are now marching from left to right. So, oops, I'm going to go in a little tighter so that maybe, yeah, you can see better there now. Right? So, just checking. All right. So we're ready to go here. I'm going to show you real quick. When I made this, the great thing about this shaper origin is that I can create the groove with this layout by cutting on the inside of the line and just basically making a curved dado. And when I want to make the track piece that fits down into that, I change from an inside cut to an outside cut, and now what it does is it actually slices out and leaves the piece of material in the middle, and I can do an offset if I want to make it so it slips perfectly down into the groove. So I'm going to go back to my inside cut. I'm going to start on that. I'm not actually going to make the whole jig. I'm going to just show you how I route one part of it, and then I'm going to show you how to do the outside cut on the other side, and then go over and I'll show you how the jig works, and maybe we can take a look a little bit closer to it, at it, to see exactly how this thing created this jig and how great it is for the shop as an addition to help with jigs and lots of other things. I mean, we use this thing to build almost the entire project for this Wood Whisperer jewelry box. So, as I said, I've got a spiral upcut bit or downcut bit in in the origin. I'm going to back up a little bit on the camera here. Try and zoom in. I'm going to create that groove on the left side of my plywood, and then I'll change it and cut the track on the right side, and this way you'll get some kind of an idea. I've got it hooked up to my vacuum. The minute I turn it on, everything should be functioning, and we'll go from there. So I need to set my depth of cut, and then I think I'm ready to go. So here we go. Let's make sure I'm on camera the way I want to be. Yep. All right, so my depth of cut, I'm only going to go down in 1/8 of an inch because there's really no sense in, like I said, I'm not going to cut the whole thing out. Turn the machine on. I'm going to start on that lower line and go to my left. So if I bring that down and zoom in a little bit, hopefully the router noise wasn't too bad. You can see I made 3 distinct cuts. Let me bring that video back up there. There we go. And it's left a tiny little bit of fuzz in between the 3 cuts. If I were to measure that, it's going to come up precisely at 3/4 of an inch. And that allows me to make the other half of this jig, which is the track. So when we did the jig, I made a stationary base, routed the arc through the entire piece, removed it, put on another piece of plywood, cut a second groove in there for the shuttle, all the way through it, and then I took that off and put on another piece, and we cut on the outside of the line to create the track, which is what I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to move my camera back up to the screen. I'm going to come up. Where's my line? Let's back up a little. All right. So there's my 3 diameters. Oops, get it on camera, will you? There we go. So I've got it on camera, and instead of an inside cut, like I said, I'm going to do an outside cut. So now what's happening is it's going to leave that material behind. And then this one, I should be able, I don't need to do anything in that middle diameter, but on that bottom diameter, I want to do an outside cut as well. So it should, no, let's do an inside cut and see if that does it. Yep, that did it. So the smallest diameter is an inside cut, largest diameter is an outside cut. Let me back up, show you how that works, and show you what it leaves behind. And the great thing about this whole rig is you can set this up at any time I can run them. I can test fit them if things don't fit quite perfectly. I can put the grooved pieces back in and offset and make the grooves a couple of thou wider in order for the track to fit down in there. All of that stuff. So let me cut the outside cuts, make the track real quick, and then we'll go take a look at how the jig works. Back up a little so that you can actually see the thing running. Right? So I'm going to do the outside cut, turn on the machine. Yup. Trying not to make you guys motion sick by watching my camera flop all around here. So you can see what I have on the left there again is the groove that I created. So in a piece of plywood about 2 feet long, like 8-9 inches wide, I would run that groove all the way through from end to end. Take this off, and I would make the groove about half the depth of whatever my track is going to be. I think I made my track out of 1/2 inch material, so I went down about 1/4 of an inch here, and cut the groove all the way across. I took another piece of plywood. It wasn't this big. It was probably, maybe 10-12 inches long, and then just ran that same groove right through the center at the same radius. I then pulled that off and put a third piece of plywood on that was 1/2 inch thick. I had to put a spacer underneath to bring it up level with my tape board. And then I ran the outside cuts to create the track, and I took that pretty much straight down until it pierced that piece of 1/2 inch plywood and made separated the track from it. All of that stuff, including this board, is double face taped down to the bench. You can do that if you want, or you can clamp it, you can screw it down, depending on how you want to think about it. So the really cool thing with this is I made this tape board up when we had the class in, I think it was October, and I just kept the tape board with the patterns and stuff for the class. It was October or November. We're in March, and I put the tape board, just clamped it to my bench, and the Shaper Argent recognized this and brought up this exact design. I didn't have to load anything specific. It just knew that this was the last thing I did with this particular tape board, so it automatically loaded the design. And that's really convenient, because if something were to happen to part of or all of a jig, I could really just very rapidly remake this. And again, as I said, if I run the grooves and then I make the track and I go to fit it in there and the track is too wide to fit down in there easily, I could throw the groove board back in. I just line up my center line, and instead of doing a perfect inside cut, I could offset it 2, 3, 4 thousandths of an inch, run it on one side or the other to just widen that groove up by a few thou at a time, and then until I can just drop that track right in there. So let me switch my cameras again, if I can. And then I've got to switch over to the one at the bandsaw. and we'll go over there, and hopefully you'll still be able to hear me, because I'm using a stationary microphone right here, and I've got the camera over at the bandsaw, so we'll make the best of it. I'm going to go over and make a cut, and then I'll bring the jig back over here, and we can talk a little bit about it. And hopefully at that point I'll be able to take a few questions in the chat, and we'll wrap this thing up, because I'm looking not to make these an endless Tuesday night operation here. The idea is come in for half an hour, 45 minutes, get you something that'll give you a few good tips, and then move on to the next week. So let me head over there. I'm going to switch the camera over to the bandsaw. I'm going to run the jig real quick, show you how it cuts, and then I'll bring it back over here and we'll talk about it. I do have the mic on all the camera, but I'm not sure that that is feeding out to YouTube. So I don't have my chat window over here, and I don't know if you're saying you can hear me or you can't hear me, but I'm going to make the cut and we'll go from there. I'll go back here. Switch my cameras around. Go this way. We'll go to the close-up camera real quick. Alright. So what I've got going on, wait a minute, that's the wrong camera. What's going, oh no, that's YouTube. There's a delay. I keep forgetting. Not used to a delay. I'm used to doing this on Zoom or something like that with an online class, so that everything is instantaneous. But with a live stream, there's a little bit of a delay. So what I've got, and I'm not sure you can see it directly on camera or not, but I've got a real nice curved surface there. The other thing that I did with the jig in class was I took this, I made up a second jig, and I took it and I mounted it onto my stationary disc sander, and I put the apex sort of in the, just on the one side of center of the disc, and what that allowed me to do was this actually slightly overhangs. This is our 34-inch radius right here, and this overhangs just a tiny little bit, and it's got some bandsaw marks in there, but not too many, because you know those Carter bandsaw blades are pretty nice for leaving an absolutely amazing surface. But I can take it over to the disc sander and set up that jig and just run it on there, and it just absolutely smooths up that surface 100%. So let's talk about how I cobbled the jig together. You can see this was the lower piece of the shuttle. I cut this out on that 34-inch radius. Here's the 32 and the 31.25-inch radius with the 31 3/4-inch radius in the middle, and it takes that whole piece out of there. I adjusted it so that literally when it sits on there, there's no rattle up against my track, but it allows it to slide perfectly freely. A little bit of paste wax on the bottom of the shuttle and in the groove, and a little bit of paste wax here means I can almost stand back, just give the thing a shove, and it'll work itself through the bandsaw. I have stops here specifically for these drawer fronts. So we had to cut our drawer fronts a very specific size, which was a little oversized for what we were doing. But this way, I can just stop it and make things very repeatable. The base of the jig, as I said, was just a solid piece. We routed the groove in there and then set in the track. I have the center line on there, which when I set it up on the bandsaw, I set it up so that was just in front of the teeth, and the edge of this thing is reasonably parallel to the miter gauge slot on the bandsaw itself, and that way, it's a radius, so it's going to cut the radius no matter what. I added a block in the back here, just to set the drawer front up against, and then the stops at either end, and a toggle clamp to keep it all in there because, well, that way it keeps your fingers away from the blade. Those Carter Products blades are really nice, but they'll cut this just as quickly as they'll cut that. So the object there was to keep everyone safe. So let's see where we are on questions. I'm going to go back to my wide shot if I can. And I will bring up the chat box in YouTube and see. All right. So could you guys hear me when I was at the bandsaw? I did talk a little bit. Is my first question to you, and I'm seeing. This will give me a couple of seconds to scroll back through here and see what questions, if any, you have. All right. Alex Snodgrass is asking, is this live or is it Memorex? Unfortunately, all that's telling us is how old you are, my friend. All right. So let's scroll down there. Ray says he is on the fence for purchasing a Shaper Origin. I would really like to tell you that if you mention my name when you're buying one, you would get a discount or some kind of consideration, but that's not the case. They have generously lent me for an extended period of time a Shaper Origin, but the more I use it, the more ideas I have to use it. In fact, I told you last week, right after the live feed, the next day I left and went to Connecticut, to the Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking to teach a class, and we were doing an Eli Terry shelf clock. It's a pillar and scroll clock. And we used it for the joinery for the entire case of this mantle clock. We used it to, if you saw on the email that went out today, there was a little scroll board piece that was cut out. That's directly from that clock class from over the weekend. We could barely hear you when you were at, thanks Dave, at the bandsaw. And John Wayne said it was very low. Okay, so hopefully that means to me that definitely on the evenings that I am away from the bench or wandering around the shop showing, because one of the things I want to do is there's a bunch of table saw stuff I want to show you on using both of the table saws I have here in the shop. There's more stuff I want to show you at the joiner and the planer and things like that. So what that really means to me is I'm going to have a wireless mic on so that you can hear me at all times instead of trying to set up the shotgun mic on the camera and live with the ambient sound from that. So that'll be a good thing. I do appreciate all the input on that. Dean K says, buy one. Like Chuck, I keep finding new ways to use it. Uh, yeah, it's pretty cool. There have been a ton of projects that we've used it on here. Last year, at the end of the year, we one of the last classes that was in the shop. We did a very contemporary Wendell Castle piano bench that had two through tenons on either side. The legs came up, and the had two tusk tenons on there that went through completely through the seat of this piano bench, and we used it to form the mortises uh, on the in the seat. And after we made the thing, I was absolutely positive I could, because the shoulders are on a slight angle. I could have rigged up the the leg posts on the angle and routed the tenons and minutely adjusted them until it was an absolute perfect press fit on the tenons. So the more you have, the more tools you have, the more problems you can solve. And to me, even though I'm a traditional, primarily 18th century furniture maker, I see a whole lot of applications for this in my shop. If you guys came out to the woodworking shows last year, and yes, we did woodworking shows last year, there are no woodworking shows this year. Uh, who knows if they'll ever be able to come back? We're hoping. Um, but if you came out to the shows last year, I had the Shaper Origin with me, and one of the things I did in my presentation was show you the backsplat to a Chippendale chair that was cut out using the Shaper Origin, and that was really the turning point to me. It was done by one of the students who came here to build a set of those chairs, and uh, he and the other person in the class were very hesitant to have to scroll saw out uh, 6 or 8 backsplats for themselves and have them kind of all be similar enough that you wouldn't notice the variations and of good enough quality to actually use. So we used the uh, Origin to cut them out, and they all came out exactly the same. And the edges were just in need of a tiny little bit of surface prep, and they were done. It's for certain things, it's an amazing tool, and uh, now that I've been using it, I wonder how I ever got along without it. And the answer is with a fair amount of difficulty. There was always a lot more hand fitting for certain tedious operations than there are with this. As I said, I could make this jig without a Shaper Origin, and uh, if you want next week, I would be happy to show you that process using a circle jig, but it's basically, we know what the diameters are. You would just make up the circle jig and for the router and just rotate through it. Plunge router works wonders for this. You could even cut the track. The big difference is you're not going to get that micro adjustment unless you're using the micro fence circle jig for their plunge router in order to make the channel a little wider. And at that point, I would probably start by making the track and then running the groove in there, because at that point I can test the track and then do some minor adjustments to widen that track rather than attach the track, cut the groove first, remove that, put on something else, then try and line that up again. It's not as easy with that as it is with the Shaper Origin. If I take this piece up, I could easily take this one in, line up that center line again, and be close enough that I could literally route the track right off of this and make the groove a little bigger. The precision is just phenomenal for a handheld router. And I suppose if I was using the micro fence, I could probably use the same alignment system. At most, I'm going to be off the thickness of my pencil line, or a portion thereof. So, hopefully, this helps us work through some of the technical issues. I'm learning more each week as I go. I haven't most of the things I've done in the past. I've either live streamed hands-on classes where we were doing things on Zoom, and you had a camera and I had a camera, and we could see one another and work, and it was happening in real time. Now this is my first time doing this with a little bit of a delay. And I'm trying to, I haven't done any of that live streaming stuff in a long time. So I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to show you the information and make it stuff that would be interesting. And hopefully next week things will improve even more. And by the end of this month, I'll be able to start advertising this on various other platforms as well. So let's see, what else do we have? Any other questions? Dean K said he heard I moved down south. No, I'm in the Pocono Mountains. I'm out in Jim Thorpe. I'm about an hour and a half north of Philadelphia and about an hour and a half west of New York City. Oh, somebody said it was James said it was, yeah, my wife's health demanded the move to Ohio. That was when I took the job at Popwood as an editor. But we moved back for my wife's mental health. We now are living here in, like I said, we're in Jim Thorpe, and our daughter lives about an hour south of here, and she has two grandkids, and I think my wife would have been out of her mind living in Cincinnati and having the grandkids 9 hours away. So we're having lots of fun. But she's doing great health wise, so that's the important part. All right. James says a quick question: do traditional woodworkers criticize you for using CNC or shaper technology? Well, that was exactly the reason why I did, during the year of COVID, the woodworking shows were virtual. And I asked Felder if I could borrow one of the Hammer benchtop CNCs. And I played with it for several months to put together a presentation for the woodworking shows. And mostly what I did was I used it to create some even more simplistic jigs than this. I'd say go look at it on the website for the woodworking shows, but it's gone. So I will try and locate if I have the raw footage for that stuff or the edited footage, and see if I can't throw it up on my YouTube channel here. And that way you'll be able to see it. And when the student came in having used the Origin to cut out a backsplat for a Chippendale chair, it really drove it home to me that these are just more tools for you to use. And the only reason you use any tool is for a greater chance of success. And while I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm going to cut out a Chippendale backsplat with it, to have it as a tool to use in a class where you may not have as much experience using a scroll saw or a bandsaw as I do, I think it's an awesome thing. For stuff like this, to make, as one of my students said, an animated jig for the bandsaw or the table saw or anything like that, something where you have a lot of moving parts, to me, this, it was a no-brainer to break out the shaper origin and create this jig. It was so fast and so repeatable that if I destroyed the jig right now, in about 20 minutes I could make another one. So I tend to really use the tool for. I'm not cutting my drawer dovetails with the shaper origin, although I'm sure I could. But like I said, for the woodworkers for a jewelry box, we did almost all the joinery, which made it uh, very repeatable and took out a lot of the human error that occurs from running drawer runner grooves in case sides and things not lining up. This made everything, it improved the accuracy of the whole process and gave them, the students, a whole lot better chance at having to deal with fewer problems down the road. So, great. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Oh, wow. I see lots of people here. So, yes, they do. I forgot. I got into my talk there, James, and just kept on going. Yeah, they used to come through the woodworking shows, and I would be demonstrating how to hand cut dovetails, and people would look at me literally every week. I'd have 2, 3, 4 of them come into the booth and say, "What do you think in CNC? Isn't it cheating?" And the answer is no. And this is why. Uh, Again, I'm not going to cut all my dovetails for my drawers with it. That's, to me, that's the craft. But you may not have a ton of experience cutting dovetails. You may not particularly like it. So this helps you get through something that helps you be successful right from the beginning, rather than struggling and struggling and struggling. I don't know anybody that's got so much time in the shop that they just go, I have way too much time there. I can just cut dovetails forever. Particularly the older I get, the more I realize like our time is going to be pretty limited here in the shop. So I hope you. That seems to be the last of the major questions here, unless somebody's got something else. I'm going to shut this down and say, come on back next week. I have to think about whether I want to do the handheld router version of this. I really like to talk a little bit next week about the advantages and disadvantages of right tilt and left tilt table saws, and go through some of the things that I like to do on each of those, since I happen to have one of each in my shop. So that's a little preview for next week. Keep your eyes on your inbox. Hopefully you will get something in the mail. Please, if you have any suggestions or questions about tonight's presentation or future presentations, if there are things you want to see, feel free to email me. If you got the email, which I hope you did, just reply to that and I'll get the info for the evening. So I will try and work in a lot of really cool things over the coming months, every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week, and hopefully the technology part of it just keeps getting better every week. Thanks. Have a good night. Where is it?